What is the difference between the feeling the breath and knowing the breath? What is the difference there? And this is actually when you are being aware of your breathing. You know, when you start to be aware of your breathing, always mention you eventually come into this present moment. You're not really watching going in and going out. You're watching that part of the breath right now. And the simile which one of the commentaries gives, this is from the Visuddhimagga. You can imagine this is a piece of wood, and you're sawing the piece of wood in half. This is the saw, you're sawing in half. When you first focus, you can see the whole saw, you know it's going in, it's going out, it's sawing this way, sawing that way. But after a while, you just focus in on that tiny piece of that wood where the saw blade is touching. And you only see one saw tooth, one tooth of the saw at a time. You focus in. And you don't know whether that tooth of the saw is at the end of the saw, in the middle, or in the beginning, because all those saw teeth look pretty much the same. All you see is just that tiny piece of wood where the saw blade is touching, and just one tooth. And that means the in-breath and the out-breath start to appear almost indistinguishable. You just see a tooth cutting the wood. You start to simplify your perception of the breathing. You don't really know it's the beginning of an in-breath, middle of the in-breath, end of the in-breath, or the middle of the out-breath, or whatever. It's just breath happening. It's simplifying so much. The more simplicity you have in there, the more energy your mindfulness gets, and you start getting the joy coming up in the breath. It's a natural phenomena. And at first it kind of, what on earth is going on? Your breath was never a source of joy and happiness. Maybe going to a rock concert would be a source of joy and happiness. Maybe having the most delicious meal in a great restaurant is a source of happiness. But watching a breath was happiness. For many people that's really weird, but it was happening. One thing about the training of being a scientist, if it's there and it's happening, you have to admit it. Then you find out the causes. And part of being a scientist is exploring things which you don't expect to happen, but which are happening. And that means after a while you see this happening. And as the joy comes up, you can notice that joy is coming from the mental experience of the breathing, not the physical. The breath is joyful. It's a mental piti sukha. It's a citta sankhara. Citta means the mind. It's created by the mind. A piece of feces, it's ridiculous to think that's beautiful. You can think, wow, 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 wow. But that's true. That's what happens when your mindfulness gets really strong. You're starting, what's dominating you is not what the piece of feces looks like, but how the mind knows it. Fascinating area of psychology, which only meditators can experience, so it hasn't been really investigated. But that's what happens. Feeling the breath and knowing the breath, it's a different experience. And knowing the breath is usually with a lot of joy and happiness, the piti sukha.